So today, day one, again, this is a 2-day series. So this Thursday and next Thursday. Today, we're going to focus on the big picture of being a board member. And it's your fundamental legal responsibilities if you are a board member. So we're going to tell you what those responsibilities are, but to make you a good board member, we're going to give you some education on how you can be good at this. What are resources that will help you make good decisions?
Avis, can I quickly interrupt you?
Please.
Only because I'm seeing people writing. I believe we're going to share this PowerPoint.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to share this PowerPoint at the end, so you do not frantically have to write everything down. You can watch and just listen if you'd like.
Most definitely. So the three things that we're going to cover today: duty of care, duty of obedience, and duty of loyalty. Those are the three legal responsibilities of a business, running a business, because nonprofits are a business. So whether it's a corporate or a nonprofit, these are legal responsibilities of the boards of those organizations. Duty of care involves your ability to serve and exercise best judgment for that nonprofit. Duty of obedience is legal responsibilities around compliance. And duty of loyalty is where you're putting the organization's interest before your own. So again, we're going to prop you up with some education as far as things that will enable you to do that and get you going. All right, now I got to get my thing to click forward. Kathy's going to lead a little exercise to get us going.
All right. So what I would like you to do on a paper or something that you have in front of you, I want you to keep this. We're hoping you attend next week as well. But I would like you, and this is for your personal use, and if we don't get to this, like if we don't talk about it today, you're going to reach out to one of us or both of us so that we can help you. This activity is called Cares, Concerns, and Compliments. On a piece of paper or on a 3x5 card or something that you're not going to lose in the next week, I want you to write down maybe the reason you're here, but a care you have for yourself as a board member or for your organization, or a concern or a compliment you have for your current board, for your current organization, but something that you are either worried about, concerned about, or just want to share, or a compliment. And what I want you to do is, and you can do more than one, but I would like you to keep this, and hopefully over the next 2 sessions, we answer this. Otherwise, we're going to come back and take some time next Thursday and try to make sure we've covered everything that you wanted covered. We made this presentation based on what we know, but maybe we are just completely missing the boat for you. So please put down a care, concern, and or compliment for your organization that you're representing or yourself as a board member. I can only see 2 of you. So when you guys look up, I'm going to go on.
We'll give everybody a minute here. Yeah, the goal is for us is to really be giving you guys, hopefully what you need. And if not, we will definitely follow up and make sure we do that.
Okay, you have about 30 seconds left. By the way, I have 2 screens. I'm very proud of the fact that I have 2 screens, but now I'm looking at you, but now I can't see you. Now I see you, but now you don't think I'm looking at you. Okay. So I apologize but I keep forgetting I have it. And then I'm like, oh, I can see everybody. All right. I think your 30 seconds are about up. Of course, if you come up with more, you're welcome to write them down.
Yeah. And as we're going through this, if you're like, oh, this is something that we need to focus on, it develops a concern for you. Feel free to edit this as you go through. This is something I think we should do as continuing education for our board or for myself. So again, here's our big 3 we're hitting today: duty of care, duty of obedience, and duty of loyalty. Anytime you Google search the responsibility of a nonprofit board member, you are going to find these big 3 everywhere, because these are the legal responsibilities. So basically, we're going to break these down. We're going to start with duty of care. So each board member is responsible for making decisions on behalf of the organization they are serving and exercising their best judgment in doing so. Now, we are going to give you at least 3 pillars. There's a lot more, but we're going to give you 3 pillars to enable you to use that best judgment, to support that best judgment. I know Bill Roby's on here, our executive director. He loves the stool analogy. The 3 things that prop something up. And these are 3 really good core things as far as best judgment goes. 1, mission statement. Surprisingly, it's kind of something that's out there. It's on your website and everything, but it should be really your guiding lanes for a lot of your decisions is your mission statement. It's not just out there for advertising. It is the guiding thing, your lighthouse of your organization. The other one's going to be tactical and strategic plans for your organization. A lot of people do a strategic plan and then it sets aside and you get going and you get excited about something and then you forget to gut check what you're excited about against what you were intending to do, what your plans were. The other one, of course, is the finances, budgets and financial statements, and we'll go over those as well. So getting into these mission statements, you all should have one. It's a concise explanation of why your organization exists. It's going to describe your purpose, your overall intention. Again, it's establishing that long-term direction. But with that long-term, it also tells you your goals for your daily operations at the same time. It's really a foundation for everything you do, your program, your service, your culture. It is how you communicate your purpose to not only your staff, but to your stakeholders. At the bottom of everything, it's telling where you do your work, who you're doing it for, why you're doing it, and how you do it. So it really is establishing your organization's lane. So if you say you serve El Dorado County in your mission, everybody's going to expect you to serve El Dorado County in its entirety. If you are only serving South Lake Tahoe, you probably want to call that out so people are aware of where your constituents are, where your clients are. That's super, super important. This really is part of establishing your decision-making. Whenever you're deciding to launch a new program, you always go back to that mission statement and say, is it within and is it serving our mission statement? This is how important this is. So throughout this presentation, you're going to see little blue rule boxes. This is where this actually ties to something legally and stuff. And a lot of people think, oh, mission statement, we do it and that's it. Actually, your mission statement is what determines your nonprofit status with the IRS. And it actually is included when you initially file your exemption status. And it's filed every time you do your 990s. So that mission statement is not only your guiding lane, but it's actually a legal principle for your organization. Super, super important. Now, that's not to say if you're like, oh my goodness, I just read my mission statement. I haven't looked at it in forever. It's always been out there on your website, on my website, and it's not exactly what we're doing. We've actually expanded, or we've actually contracted, and we've changed a little bit as far as who we're serving, what we're doing. It's okay. It's not unheard of for an organization to change its mission statement as you grow, or as the economy causes things to change, or a new need arises in the community and you want to fulfill that need. It's okay to change your mission statement. But if you do, you want to make sure you communicate that to the IRS and let them know, because it is what is keeping you legal. It is what is, again, establishing your lane for them and showing them, this is what we're doing. This is why we should be a nonprofit. So actually, if you change your mission statement, you should resubmit it to the IRS and let them know that change. And actually, when you get this presentation, those blue source links are hyperlinks for you to get more information as far as how to do that. I also have a little source link at the bottom. So whenever you see, you're going to see these little exclamations at the end, all throughout the presentation. These are going to be, if it doesn't happen the way you think it is, or if something has changed, this is how you go about fixing it, or this will be the ramifications. So
Avis,
another, yeah.
Real quick, I know many of you are on different types of boards, very big boards and very small boards, but something we meant to mention, we understand that some of you on boards of big organizations might not actually be creating the mission statements, but you are approving them. So we hope when we say you, if it's your ED that's making the mission statement with the staff, that as a board, you're taking these considerations that Avis put out there to look at before you approve a mission statement. You might mention, hey, we really only serve South Shore of Tahoe. Maybe we need to add that into our mission statement. And for those of you that are small enough that you are making your own mission statement, that's what this info is for too.
Yeah, most definitely. And if you ever need help with mission statements, or you want to, either develop one or rework yours, Kathy and I are always happy to consult on that as well. I know a couple of organizations on here that I work through their mission statement, and it takes some time because you are defining your lane. You're defining where you're going to operate and what you're going to do, at least at the beginning, or maybe redefining part the way through. So the next pillar we're going to give you in making decisions is strategic or tactical plans. A strategic plan generally is a big picture goal of an organization. Typically, you're looking 3 to 5+ years down the road. It's going to provide your guidance for planning activities to achieve those goals. So this is basically, what is the organization going to do? So this is a little bit further out. Where are you heading? Tactical plans are short-term in nature, typically 1 year or less. These are going to be shorter, smaller steps to accomplish your strategic plan. It may include specific goals, detailed schedules, budgets, or resources. A good example we just went through at the foundation, ours was detailed schedule. We actually sat down as a staff in November and looked at 2023 and laid out everything across the entire organization. Not only Avis and Kathy are going to deliver this training today, but Chris Ringness is going to need to do our marketing and communications about this training. Various steps that lead to the detailed schedules of our short-term tactical plan for 2023. And how we're going to deliver some of the things that we had thought about doing the last couple of years, more out in our strategic thoughts as an organization. Now the rubber's hitting the road. What month are we going to do it? What are we going to need? How much money are we going to need to do it? How much time do we need to do it? So that is the really tactical. It can be something as simple as that. For us, it was as simple as sitting down and doing a calendar and having everyone in the room around that calendar and having that done. It was very, very exciting. Throughout the presentation as well, you're going to see these little closer looks. So I wanted to do a little bit of a deeper dive. So I'm going to click on this closer look. It may be a sample. It may be an example of something. But this really is a tool that I'm going to give you to really drill down into strategy and tactics. Again, this is something that can get very muddled whenever you're looking at it again. Strategy is intent. Tactics is putting that into action. Skipping down to a little bit further, again, strategy is aligned to goals and objectives. Tactics is aligned to the strategy. So again, it's setting that idea of an outward perspective where you want to go in the strategy in the long term, and then tactics are what you're going to do to deliver that. They're going to be very tangible in tactics. Again, like we said, Chris needed to do a press release for this class. Chris did our website for this class. Kathy and I developed it. Those are very tangible things. The strategy was we were going to deliver this class and how we wanted to, that we wanted to deliver it and our objectives for it. The tactics were how we're going to get there. So again, throughout the presentation, you're going to find little things like this along the way to help you. And I also gave you, there's a resource at the bottom on this one. So again, as you're making decisions as a board, a lot of times I call it the squirrel. For those of you that have seen Up, the movie Up, and the dog's like, squirrel. It is so easy to get distracted by a squirrel and stuff and get some shiny object. Always gut check that squirrel or gut check that shiny object against, is this part of where we want to go? The answer may be yes, Or it may be, no, it's not. Let's put this on the back burner. Maybe build it into a strategic plan down the road and stuff. But be careful of what I like to say, squirrels and shiny objects. Always use your strategic and tactical plans as a guiding, as your bumpers to keep you on the road to where you want to be. The other pillar in this one is budgets and financial statements. Everybody should have one. So as you're making a decision as an organization, especially in nonprofits where we know the finances may be driving a lot of what we're doing, you want to refer back to your budgets and financial statements. A budget is a document that's always done kind of usually at the end of the year, looking forward to the next year. That way you have some actuals built into it as far as, what you can base the next year on. Basically, a budget is going to lay out how you're going to spend your money and how you'll get the money to spend it. So usually it's divided up into two sections: revenue sources, which is your money in. Now, my rule on the revenue sources for you for today as a board member is usually it's divided up into two types of revenue sources. It can, of course, go down deeper, but the big two are restricted and unrestricted. And a rule regarding restricted monies: if you have restricted monies, for example, Kathy Haven had you sign a grant acknowledgement form because you got a grant from the Community Foundation to do a particular thing for your organization. That means for that entire fiscal life of that grant, it is restricted. It can only be used for those particular things that were in that grant. So in your budget, it should be reflected as restricted, and you should be able to see that money called out separately. Unrestricted funds, which we all love and we wish we had more of, are monies that you can use legally for any purpose that serves the organization that is appropriate.
I like how she has to put the word legally in.
Huh?
Because, I like how you put the word legally in, like we're going to illegally use the money.
Hopefully not. And stuff, but you do, again, you are a steward of the money that's been donated to you, even those unrestricted funds. So you want to make sure that they are used, again, for the purpose of your organization. But the big rule out of resources is restricted. Make sure that any funds that, I know of an organization that did busing for schools are very, very expensive. So they did a Move That Bus campaign. Raised tons of money. It was wonderful. They can now only ever spend that money on buses to transport kids. They can't move it anywhere else. It is locked and loaded. It must stay there because that's what they told the donors it would be used for. Operating expenses, your other thing. This is your money out. You generally broken up into two things: your anticipated operating expenses, which is kind of your normal operations to deliver your programs, your materials, your labor, if there's any machinery involved, type of things. So these are the things that deliver, your program. Then there's that general overhead stuff. Whether you are delivering your program or not, the bills are going to keep coming in. So if you have an office space, your general overhead is going to be in there. Any insurance, as a nonprofit, you should have liability insurance. You might have directors and officers insurance. Those are all part of whether you're up and going or not. It is going to be a continual cost. Utilities for that space. If you're ever curious in the closer look here, I have provided at least a starting budget template to help organizations. This is one that we use here at the foundation. Our CFO uses, and you can see it literally breaks it again out into the revenue at the top, all those, and you can see unrestricted, restricted, and stuff up in the revenue where I can see where grants came in that are restricted. Having that separate and not getting those muddled are super important. And then you get down into those money out, those expenses. Again, this will be in there in case you're like, do we have everything? And you can go back and check against this template that we provide nonprofits that are starting up who maybe never done a budget before, or maybe we're consulting with a nonprofit that may be missing a few things out of their budget. So we will as well include this in the, that'll be attached off to the presentation. So budget is a really good thing. Whenever you're making those decisions, reference the budget. Can we afford it? Did we forecast it? Those are super important. One thing I would like to take a quick break on is discuss overhead. Overhead is something that's for nonprofits that people are really scared of. For the longest time, nonprofits want to keep their overhead low. You want to show that you are, giving out your money in the program and to the clients that you are intending to serve. There is definitely a changing mindset around overhead right now, as far as it being negative. It is changing. People are starting to realize that being a nonprofit's a lot of hard work. Not only do you have those program costs that are accrued as far as being a nonprofit, but there's fundraising as well. Because we have to go out and usually do a big dinner or anything, and that is part of your overhead. So you have to spend money to make money. And that is part of your overhead whenever you're reporting it, if you're a nonprofit that does a 990. As well as your general costs as well are built into part of overhead. So you can see how quickly overhead can increase and mount up. But it is something that really is a changing dynamic right now in granting and in people realizing that it does cost money to raise money. And we actually just spoke about this yesterday with a group that we had seen a grant application change where they said, what's the overhead associated with this grant? Whenever you're applying for a grant, definitely make sure to include your executive director is going to spend time on that grant. The staff of that nonprofit that you're governing is going to spend time on that grant. It's okay to include overhead in a grant. Again, it takes time beyond just delivering that program. It takes time and money and staff to make that happen. So I just want to do a little pause on overhead and realize, I know we at the foundation, we definitely coach nonprofits when they're applying for grants. Please make sure you include, the overhead in that budget for your grants ask. Now we're going to get into financial statements a little bit. Financial statements are scary. So I tried to break this up into layperson's term a little bit. Usually everybody here has a budget and you have actuals that your treasurer or your CPA is helping you track. Some of this other stuff may be very nebulous to you. It may be something that because you're not a big nonprofit, you don't see these things very often. Maybe your CPA is tracking it for you if you have a bookkeeper, and therefore they'll utilize it for you to do your taxes at the end of the year. But maybe it's not something that you as a smaller organization get into. But as a board member, you should be aware, at least at some basic levels, of what these financial statements have in them, and be able to ask some questions, and again, hold that CPA or that treasurer accountable for what is going on with your books. Again, finance is probably the place where boards struggle the most to get people with the knowledge, to get a CPA or to get someone who has this invested interest. So what we're going to give you here today is, as a layperson, finance is definitely Kathy and I probably our least propped up skill, but to give you some language and put this more in the everyday board members language for you to know. So there's going to be 4 things that usually comprise that make up a financial statement. The first one is the statement of financial position. It's basically a balance sheet of showing you what you own, which are your assets, and what you owe, which are your liabilities as a specific date. Now, let's take this down into terms that we understand. Assets for a nonprofit can be everything from furniture to supplies, including event supplies. It can be any equipment needed for the program, or money, cash donations or grants are all under assets. When it comes to liabilities, these are things like accounts payable, things that you are going to pay out. Like if you have a web designer design some web content for you, if you have a debt or a loan as a nonprofit, If you are a granting organization like we are here at the El Dorado Community Foundation, are grants payable because we give grants to other organizations. Liabilities can also be broken up into current and long-term liabilities. Current liabilities can be something very near future. So if you are getting wine or champagne for a fundraising event, that would be a current liability. That is something that you are going to pay out here in the very near future. Long-term, again, are going to be those longer things. I know that we have some organizations that have vans, for instance, to do their work, to transport clients. If they have a loan on that van or you have a mortgage on your building, that would be a long-term liability for that nonprofit. So being a little bit more knowledgeable about your financial statements is a way to keep yourself as a good board member. The second thing, and that's part of a financial statement, is the income statement. This is your statement of activities. And I actually called our CFO on this one because I'm like, I need a lay person's, again, how to break this down, because it shows all your financial activity for an organization and our results of your financial work. A good one to think about this one, to equate this one to, even though it's a big scary word, is your bank statement. Because your bank statement will show you the checks you've written, who they've gone to, the money that has gone out. It will also show you the money that has gone into your bank account, whether it be an auto deposits from your employer, whether it be you stopped at the ATM and you stuck some money in and it counted the bills for you. It's going to show you all the ways income came in, and it's going to show you all the ways your money went out. You went and did a withdrawal at the ATM. That is the way to think of an income statement, your statement of activities flowing in and out. Statement of cash flow is another one. Is your third piece of a financial statement. Again, that's showing cash going in and out of your organization, but it's going to break it down a little differently. This is going to have your operating activities, your revenues or expenses for your nonprofit. This is where you would see salaries captured, revenue from contributions, any office supplies will be in the operating activities. Investments. A lot of the nonprofits in our community may have an endowment here at the foundation. So any investment activities are going to show up underneath investment activities in your statement of cash flow. And then any financing, if some people have savings accounts and stuff. So anything or any interest that's going on with a loan, that's going to be under your financing activities in your statement of cash flow. Again, we are learning this stuff. This is not Kathy and my natural area of expertise. So I'm just trying to give you some language so you can be a little bit more educated whenever you're reviewing these documents as a board member and can ask questions and feel so to do so in a confident way. The fourth thing that is part of the financial statements is your statement of functional expense. I love this one. This is my favorite part of a financial statement. And this is probably the one I'm most comfortable with, because this is where it breaks down your organization and actually shows by program, how do you spend your money? In fundraising, how do you spend your money? In management, how is your money spent? This is, again, a wonderful document to help you build your budgets. And again, keep your eyes on things that are going on. I'm not going to blow this one open, but if you've never seen, whenever you get this, you can pop open, closer look, because again, financial statements are usually pages and pages, but a lot of huge nonprofits will actually have their audited financial statements out on their website. That is a very good indicator that they are healthy, is if they have their audited financial statements out there on their website. And here I actually have the California, I believe it's the Nonprofit Alliance's financial statement. So you can go through and now compare and say, oh, I get what this means and what she meant by that. And it makes sense. So now I'm going to toss the next section over to Kathy, because this is something that she deals with day in and day out with our grants.
All right, so I get to do duty of obedience, and I just want you to know at the foundation, we joke, but I always get to be good cop, and Avis is kind of bad cop, because I always just get to give everybody money, and then she has to make sure everybody spends the money correctly. But I have to say, when we made this presentation, all of a sudden, like, I'm the one who's going to present some bearer of bad news, possibly for some of you. And I just want you to remember, don't kill the messenger. Hopefully nobody, but basically I'm going over the legal stuff, the stuff that keeps you from getting grants or maybe your organization from getting grants. But you need to know that as a board member, ultimately you, the board, is liable for making sure that your organization stays in compliance with federal and state laws. So this is what we're going to look at today. Most organizations are very good at the IRS filings and the Franchise Tax Board filings. Most organizations are quite good with the SOS, with their statement of information. And we're better than 50-50, but the DOJ is the last piece that some organizations don't realize is also part of their legal responsibility. And I do have to say the DOJ's filings it's not new, but I would say it's 10 years old. It wasn't around forever. So we're going to jump into this. Can you switch the screen, Avis? Perfect. Let's start with the IRS. So a rule. You have to, when you start a nonprofit, you have to get an EIN number. Getting an EIN number is easy. It happens in 24 hours. It's what every business does. Nonprofits are businesses. The big step is that you also have to get your exempt status, which is either Form 1023 if you're a big nonprofit or the EZ form if you're a smaller nonprofit. But so when, for example, our grants ask you for the exempt status letter, we don't want the letter that the federal government sends that says, here's your EIN number. Every business has that. We need this letter. So this is the Tahoe Learning Haven. Thanks, Avis. So by the way, I'm not controlling the screen, Avis is. So this is a new nonprofit that I started last year. And this is the letter that I would need to put in when I'm applying for the grant, because this in the first sentence tells you that in the first paragraph points out that it's a nonprofit, that you're being given tax exempt status, that you are in compliance with the rules. You have this, and it used to be if you lost this, I had this happen. I was part of, I think it was Bijou PTA. Every year there's a new president. This letter was just gone. 10 years ago, that was very hard to get a new letter. Now it is not hard. Now you can go on the IRS website and get a new one. Oh, and she even has that on here. They aren't online, but you can ask for them and they will mail you another one. As soon as I get the nonprofit letters for any nonprofit I'm part of, I immediately scan it into my computer. And for those of you that have not figured out how to scan off of your phones, that's another discussion, but I'm happy to go over that with you. And then you have it hopefully on a Google Drive somewhere. So that's the first part of the IRS requirement. Make sure you have that nonprofit letter. You do need to show that when you apply for grants, whether they're large federal grants or small grants from a service organization or from the El Dorado Community Foundation. Okay, and although when you're a nonprofit, you're exempt from income tax, exempt organizations do have to file returns. They have to file returns. Your returns are filed either as a 990 if you are a large organization making more than $50,000 annually, and it is over a 3-year average. So for example, a PTA that fundraises all this $150,000 and puts in a playground once, and then after that goes back to raising $10,000, their average over 3 years needs to be over $50,000 before they have to worry about going to a larger document, a harder document to fill out, which is the 990. The 990N is the other version of that, and that's if your gross receipts normally are less than $50,000. And now there's a postcard also. So as you can see here, I can scroll over it. Can you guys see on the right side there? You can click to see if you're eligible to do a return with a postcard, which is the EZ, very, very simple form to fill out. Now, all of these are done on a due date. The due date is always 5 months, the 15th of the 5th month after your calendar year closes, your year closes. Some of you are on a calendar year, January to December, right? And so May 15th you need to have all your filings in. You might be on a fiscal year. Those of you involved with schools, a lot of schools run July 1 to June 30th. So then your paperwork is due November 15th. Keep that in mind. It's not just for the IRS, it's all the other forms that we're going to talk about. Now, to lose federal exempt status from the IRS is pretty difficult to do. If you forget to file forms, generally, nothing's said for the first year, maybe not even the second. But after 3 years of not filing forms, you will lose your exempt status. When I do grants and you submit a grant application, I look on the IRS website. I'm not looking to see that you had the most current ones. Forget the fact that the IRS is often far behind showing what you have. I'm looking that you've at least filed something in the last 3 years. And lastly, something that I didn't know until we made this presentation, there is a fine if you are late, and it's a daily fine. So if you're late and they come back and ask, that's hopefully you're only late by a few days. Okay, so keep that in mind. 3 years, consecutive years, not just 3 years. 3 consecutive years will make it that you lose your exempt status. There is a fine if your forms are late. You have a long time, in my opinion. 5 months, 15th of the 5th month. You just need to know when your calendar is. Okay, what's on closer? What's on closer look, Avis? Okay, so thank you. Chris, if I could have your help. Okay, Chris has put a link into the chat box. I would like you to click on that link and put in the organization that you are a part of. And Avis, will you do this for me? So look, she clicked on the link. So you can do this one of 2 ways. If you know your organization's EIN number, you could put it in that way, or by your organization name. This is what I do when I'm checking to see if you are eligible for one of our grants. Then you put in your organization name. By the way, you need to do it exactly like the IRS has it, or it doesn't find it. Oh, I thought are you doing El Dorado Community Foundation, Avis?
Sure.
Okay. I wanted you to do Tahoe Learning Haven. I want to know that I'm all in compliance.
Have you filed taxes yet, though?
I have filed taxes.
Oh, okay.
It's only a year, but I filed taxes. I'm on a fiscal calendar. So if you put yours in, and I'm not going to ask you to share, but if there's issues, so when she hits search, hopefully it just brings my Tahoe Learning Haven up. If it doesn't, it's spinning. You're going to have to choose the correct one. Oh, there we go. So she can click on it, and now hopefully it's going to, I already see something there. It showed that I filled I filled out the form 990N, the e-postcard, and it tells, and literally that's about all I had to put in there. And it tells my information and my principal officer. I am actually the workhorse of the organization. My president is Tara Christians, so she's the principal officer because she's the president of the board. So this shows that, and this was filed in July, so it's up to date. It shows the tax year from till 6/30/2022. If yours does not show up to date, that has happened. I have another organization that I'm part of. I went and looked up. They show 2021s. They don't show 2022s. Until I receive a notice from the IRS, I'm not too worried about it. Now, if it didn't show 2021 or 2022, I would be concerned. So have you all found yours? And if you look, I think if you went back one, don't worry about it, Avis, don't go back. But I think you can also see your EIN notification letter there. Okay, any questions? Okay, let's go to the next one. And if you do have questions and don't want to ask them here, feel free to email me separately too. All right, Franchise Tax Board, very similar to the IRS. It's the state version of the IRS. Okay, so the fact that you're exempt from with the IRS does not automatically exempt you in the state of California. You have to file Form 3500A. Now, I have seen an organization get tax exempt status without filing this, but if you take a look to see if you have an entity status letter and you don't, this might be why. So this form is the next thing to file. And if you haven't done it, I would just do it now. And I believe you have an entity status letter to show us, right? Avis, this letter is like the, kind of like the EIN nonprofit letter. I had never been asked for this letter until like last month. I didn't have to turn in my EIN letter. I had to turn in this letter. I got it off the website, 2 minutes. It just downloaded it and now I have it. And it shows that the entity's in good standing. It shows, or it would say it's not in good standing. It shows that it's exempt from the revenue and tax code, or it can say we don't have any information. So Chris, do you have a link for this one? Oh, he does. Ooh, is this a link? No, I think this is the next one, Chris. I don't think we have a link for this one. So don't click on that one yet. That's for the SOS that we're going to talk about next. I wasn't sure. But when you go look for the entity letter, it's a really nice form there because it tells you either you're not tax exempt by them or they just don't know yet. So that's something you can look at. Okay. Any questions on the franchise tax board on this part? I think you can go to the next slide, Avis, because that's where we talk about the 199. Okay. Okay, exempt organizations have to file returns with the state, just like we do with the federal government. We don't have to pay taxes on it, but you have to file to show. So nonprofits with gross receipts more than 50,000, same with the IRS, you need to fill out Form 199. 15th day of the 5th month, same as the IRS. It's kind of nice. If your organization is less than 50,000, you get to file the easy one, the postcard, which is very similar to the IRS one as well. Failure to do so, they're a little nicer. It's only $5 a month if you're late. And again, they can revoke your tax exempt status if you do not file a return or if you don't pay the fees if you're late. Thank you, Avis. All right, so Chris already put the link in for this one. Sorry, Chris, I asked too early. The statement of information is another legal binding document that needs to be done by every nonprofit. It only needs to be done every 2 years. Initially, it needs to be filed, but I believe you're all past that phase. But then every 2 years, based on your initial filing date, it shows basically who the officers are. So that brings up the point. If you're part of a PTA and your officers change every year, then you have to file a statement of information every year. I believe the cost is $25. It's something that is very important. It's something that we check on every grant. It's very simple. It just shows active. If you're looking good, it might show like awaiting reporting. That means you need to get on it and do it. But it's a real simple form. It's just asking who your president, your treasurer, and secretary are, I believe. And it's asking if you have a different location or if anything like that has changed. Closer look, Avis. So here's the business search. And this is the link that Chris put in the chat box a second ago. So if you click on that link, I want you to do the same thing. Put in your nonprofit. You do need to put your name in this time. And this one is a hard one for me when I'm like checking your status as a grantee or possible grantee. If like there's a "the" in front of Tahoe Learning Haven and I don't put it in, it doesn't always show up. So make sure you know your legal name based on your paperwork. So this is all we look at when we're opening it. It shows that the status is active. Sometimes it'll show suspended. Or what's the other one, Avis? There's another status. Expired?
Sometimes it's even not listed.
Not listed. That's maybe what I'm thinking. So yours should show active. And you know, the nice thing about this, can you see that my initial filing date was 1/30/2022 in case I forget. So that means 1/30/2024, I need to refile this paperwork. Statement of information. All right. Am I going too fast? Is this like such common knowledge that it's kind of a waste of time? Should I go faster? Are we good? I got a thumbs up. Okay.
Yeah. I think the big thing on statement of information that I'd like to add on for Kathy is the statement of information is literally the statement of information for a lot of entities in California. So if you're not getting contacts from the Franchise Tax Board or you're not getting information from the DOJ, it is because your statement of information is out of date because those entities reference back to the statement of information when they need to contact you. So if you're like, I didn't get anything, and then your statement of information hasn't been updated and it's out of date, that's because they have a different mailing address, perhaps, because you changed mailing addresses or officers changed and they're contacting the wrong person. A lot of the other entities in California refer back to the statement of information as the record for your organization as far as your officers and your address. So that's why it's really important. It seems like it's nothing, but because it is actually the statement of record on this information, you can be missing important contacts.
And Robin just asked, if board members have changed, do we need to submit each time they change? If it's your primary board members, if it's your principal officers, like your president, your secretary, and treasurer, if they change, or if the address changes, yes, you need to go outside of that 2 years and file with them. Again, just for the same reasons Avis said, because otherwise they have no way to contact you. All right. I believe this is what you put in. You said what's on this slide, right?
Pretty much. There can be penalties assessed with this one. We haven't seen it. Again, the government tends to be very backed up right now. Again, I gave a sample of if you are late, Kathy would see something like this in that box, and it would have been red that your statement of information is due, and it would be red that she's past due.
All right, here comes the big one. This is the one that people are out of compliance with and don't even know they're out of compliance. This is why if you've ever been turned down by me, and I'm sorry, it's not me, it's them, but this is the DOJ. This is the one that scares me. This is the police. Like the IRS. I mean, no, I didn't say that. Right? They're so far behind, but this is the one that worries me. So it's charitable trust paperwork. About 10 years ago, this became a new filing. You have to file with the Attorney General. First, you have to do an initial registration form, kind of like the same with the IRS. Initially, you had to file. It's called a CT1. And after that, you have to file an RRF1 every year, the same time you do your taxes. It's a 1-page simple document, super simple document. Recently, they've added that you have to include either your 990 or you have to include, they call it TR1, Treasurer's Report. And it's also a 1-page document. And if you were paying attention to the financials that Avis just went over, that's all it's asking. Basically, money in, money out. To do the CT1, the RRF1, all you really need to know is your fiscal year, how much money you started with, and how much money you ended with. That's the numbers they're asking for. And then it asks you a bunch of questions. The only one that can get you hung up, and we're going to talk about raffles at our next week. But if you check on the box, it says you had a raffle and you don't have the raffle paperwork filed. But as long as you mark the correct boxes and you do have the correct paperwork filed, that's all you need to do. There is a fee. The fee changed. Well, and so did the RRF1. I can't figure out what the change is, but basically they have a new RRF1. So possibly if you filed in the past and all of a sudden you're out of compliance is because you filed the old RRF1. And the way I know you filed the old one, not only does it say it on the DOJ paperwork, but you paid the wrong amount. It used to be, I want to say if you made under $25,000 that year, it was $0. Now it's $25. So let's go on. Avis, because I want to show you what it looks like. Can we go on closer look first? Because I think it's better if I do this with an example. So Chris, could you put the next link in? But before you put your own organization in, I just want you to look at mine because I'm going to run you through. Wait, didn't you say if I looked up Sac County, I'd see a lot of that have problems? Can you look up Sac County? And this is going to bring up like gajillion organizations, but this way I'm not going to like offend anybody that I'm showing. So look, it shows you what kind of charity registration. Some of them will say raffle registration, but I look for the charity registration. Here are the different statuses that I could see. If it's a church, it's going to say exempt and religious. It could be mutual benefit. What I'm looking for is one of mutual benefit doesn't always apply for the same grants, but I'm looking for current. If your organization shows current, some of them say current awaiting reporting or current and something afterwards. As long as it says current, we look at you as in good standing. There are two, though, that three maybe that are not good. Delinquent is where you go first after you're not current. If you're delinquent, it means you haven't filed and you haven't gotten back to them. They probably reached out to you. Usually they send you a card like this color that says there's something wrong, or they send you paperwork back if you filed the wrong thing. I've even seen an email now, which is nice if they would start emailing it. If you're in delinquent status, it might be just a 1 year simple can you go to that one maybe, Avis? Let's see if that one's a simple one. So if you click on your organization, you can see so much information. It's a lot better actually than the IRS and Franchise Tax Board. Like I can look here and it looks like they were due last May. So they haven't filed, maybe they filed stuff. Scroll down a little further. It shows all the different filings they've done. And I can see that they did 2021. And then there's something at the top that says return check letter. I can even click on that and see maybe the check bounced and they didn't notice it. And if you click on that, it'll tell you what's wrong. Can you go a little further down, Avis? I think sometimes it even tells you, see, now it tells you, wait, stop right there. Oh, in 2011, they had a problem, but that's been, see, it says, it looks like it's been taken care of in 17. So all the way to the bottom. Oh, so I might have been wrong. It might be 11 years. So here it shows in 2021, they were incomplete because this is probably the year that they asked for the 990 to be included. They probably had an old RRF1. They just filed the RRF1. Look, it even shows that they received it, but they haven't filed their 990. The DOJ does not go to the IRS website to look to see if you filed a 990. They just mark you missing. And if the SOS stuff isn't current, maybe you don't see it. But now, if you know this information, sometimes you can just email it in. Otherwise, you mail it in. The address is right on the top of the RRF1 form, but it's quite simple. Let me tell you when it's not simple, when it's been a few years. Or some people turn in their CT1 to us when they're applying for a grant. Like, look, I've registered. But if you've been a nonprofit for 5 years, and so I can speak to this because I helped a nonprofit. Well, I was the treasurer and I filed the RRF1 form. And I'm like, that's funny. There's no number that I can put in here. And I turned it in and they wrote back and they're like, we don't have a number on file because you've never registered. This organization was 5 or 6 years old. I'm like, okay, well, I'm registering now. And they're like, oh, no, that's not how it works. You get to register and now you get to give us the last 6 years or 5 years of data. And, this was 6 years ago prior to all the online banking. So I got to dig out folders. We had them and find the beginning and end amounts of every year since 2011 or whenever it started. That is why if you file with us for like a grant and say, oh, but no, I sent it in. I sent the RRF1 in, and we can't accept it until it shows current, because most likely or possibly it's going to be more than one problem. And hey, we fixed it. It took us about a month, but we got it done and the organization is in compliance now. But that's why. And bottom line, as soon as you have the delinquent status, if you read on their website, not only are you not allowed to accept donations of any sort, you're not supposed to be spending any money. Like, you're literally supposed to stop. So what I wanted you to do now, if Chris would put up our link again, maybe it's already there. Sorry, I wasn't looking at the chat. If you'd like, I want you to put in your nonprofit status, your nonprofit. And Avis, can you go to the closer look? When you put the EIN number, if you do it that way, which to me is always easier, do only the numbers, don't do the dash. So like for the Tahoe Learning Haven, it would be 880741707. And then if you search it, that's the way to bring up just one. If it doesn't come up the first time, try it again. Sometimes I punch in a number wrong. Sometimes during the application process, somebody puts in the wrong EIN number by a little. Usually you can find it. And now if you click on it, now if it shows current, that's all we do on our end. That's all you need to do. But if you need to look at why you're delinquent, usually at the very, very bottom is where it tells you. This has only been filed once, as you can see, because it's a new nonprofit. It shows that next November it's due again. If you don't want any issues, don't wait for the 5 month and 15 days. do it sooner. If it says current awaiting reporting, November 15th is a lot of people's deadlines like this one. Perhaps you've submitted it. It used to be that they were 3 or 4 months behind. I do believe they're quicker now. I believe they're only about 1 or 2 months behind, but it might be awaiting reporting because they just haven't put it in the system. Okay. Does anybody have any questions about that? This is the pain in the butt. This is the one that gets you possibly nixed from one of our grants. And please reach out to me. I've gotten quite good at figuring out how to get back in compliance with them. But this is most important to remember because it's the newest and it's what people forget about. But truly, if you are legally compliant or your organization is and you're a board member, you should know because again, the board is legally responsible. Any questions? All right, duty of obedience. That's just a terrible word, right? That you have to be obedient. I think that covers the federal and state laws.
So I'll pick back up from here. And again, we know that a lot of you might have CPAs or someone that is doing this for your organization. As a board member, you just need to make sure it's getting done. So what I like to do is on especially the smaller boards that I'm on, PTOs, booster organizations, is we have a calendar. And whenever we get to that meeting month where something is due, we will either just have it as an agenda topic, did it get filed, or we'll actually have the treasurer or whoever's in charge of doing that filing present that it got filed in her update. Or if it's a finance committee that does it, that they presented in their update. So we include it in our calendar, and then we just, we double check things. As a board, you should be reviewing, especially your IRS and your state filings as a board and approving them before they are filed, that you agree with whatever your CPA or your treasurer is filing, that you agree with it as a board. Because again, at the end of the day, you are, as part of duty of obedience, you are legally responsible for those filings, even though you're not the one who is doing them. They should be reviewed by you and made sure that they are kept up to date by you as a board member, even if you're paying someone to do it. So that's why it's really important. A couple of other things regarding your duty of obedience and being legally responsible are your bylaws. So we went through all the financial stuff with Kathy and compliance with governments. Also your bylaws, and the bylaws are something that is registered as well with the government. Your bylaws are a legal document. A lot of people let these get out of date. They've never looked at them. You join an organization and you don't, do you have bylaws? Yes or no? Da, da, da. But bylaws are a legal document. They outline how your organization is going to be governed. Usually it will contain some minimum things around, how you're going to manage things, how your board operates, what are your practices, things like that. So bylaws are really important. They are part of your founding documents. Again, a rule is they are actually filed with the DOJ. So whenever you do your initial filing that Kathy talked about, a part of your initial filings is you have to include your bylaws. And
I don't think it's just the DOJ. It's the IRS. It's one of the first things you have to have, and the Secretary of State.
Yeah. So they are legal documents that are filed. So they are an important thing. They are something to pay attention to. Just to go over as a new board member, generally your bylaws, the common inclusions, at least by the Council on Nonprofits and the California Council on Nonprofits, the bylaws will include, look again, we've got our mission statement. It's right here. Usually it's the leading thing in your bylaws. This is where you define how your directors are elected. When does it happen? How does it happen? It also defines how your board can take action, how you make decisions, how meetings are called. Are you meeting 6 times a year? Are you meeting every month? This is all in your bylaws. Because you are a nonprofit organization serving the community, this is out there and it is available for people to know how you are governed, how board meetings are conducted, who leads the meeting. Is it a board president who leads in their absence, usually a vice chair or a vice president? Who are the officers? Underneath California law, you at least have to have 3. You have to have a board or a chair, a secretary, and a treasurer or a CFO are the minimum you have to have for a nonprofit. Now, I will tell you that some of the filings are not smart enough to tell that it is the same person's name in each one. And I have seen organizations that Joe Smith is the president, he is the secretary, and he is the treasurer. And the system will not catch it. That is not legal. So you do need to have 3 separate people in those positions, and it will go over the duties and responsibilities of each officer. The authorization, as far as are there committees involved and what is the authority of those committees? Can they only make recommendations and then the board still gets to approve, or do committees have authority? It also, for you as a board member, it's really nice to know the level of indemnification provided by the corporation to protect you. So actually, you know, as far as how you're protected and how you're legally liable for a nonprofit entity will get called out in the bylaws as far as what are you accountable for. And then any reports that are due to the directors. There may be a lot more in the bylaws and stuff, but these are at least the common inclusions in the bylaws. And a closer look is I actually put in, oh, no, it did not. Okay, I can fix this really quick. I put in the El Dorado Community Foundation's bylaws in here. So I was going to flip through real quick because they also tend to flow, and I apologize. I'm going to give you guys brain lash right now while I go to our documents and I can cruise.
Mind you, this is on our website, right? It's open for anybody to see. This is a sign that, you know, from any organization, right? We try to be as transparent as possible. We try to make sure anybody can look at anything because we are stewards of a lot of donor money. Something to consider if it's not on your website.
So we actually have our articles of incorporation as well fused in with our bylaws on our website. So if I actually go past those, then it gets into our bylaws. So you can go through them. Just looking at even our outline page of our bylaws, here's again where you can see that we have those common inclusions. The purpose is going to be our mission statements. Then you're going to get into, again, those common inclusions that I talked about. When are our meetings? When are our officers elected? What is a quorum? There is where we make our decisions, how our decisions are made. How can our board make a decision without a meeting? How do they hold telephone and electronic meetings? There's our voting rights. Here's some identification stuff and the compensation. And look, here's where it goes into our committees. And if you get into the details of that, what is allowable by our committees? What is their authority? More on that. Oh, and look, there it is. Article number 8, identification and insurance. Again, this is where you go look for, as a board member, you know, what are my rights? What am I protected from? What am I possibly liable for? What's involved in that? It's going to be in your bylaws as well.
And so just for you, so that you know, for those of you with small organizations, yours won't be 13 pages long.
No.
And that's just fine. El Dorado Community Foundation is huge. Just keep that in mind. You know, we have very different nonprofits here represented on this Zoom call.
Yeah, so we put ours out there as an example. It is not unheard of for bylaws to get overlooked and become out of date. And usually in your bylaws, it actually tells you how to amend them or change them / update them. It's going to be covered in there as far as how you're going to do that and stuff. So you want to, if you have not looked at your bylaws in a while, you definitely want to, because if you are not holding meetings in compliance with how your bylaws are written, someone in the public could call you out for that and actually report you to the DOJ or report and have you turned in and say, you know, this organization is not doing that. That's where the part of being a steward of the community's funds is where this comes into play. Again, so it's not unheard of. It'll be in there as far as telling you how to change it. Approved bylaws should be certified by your secretary and filed with the government entities. The big changes, a lot of times, if it's a little change, you won't need to report it, but the big changes legally that you need to refile your bylaws are if you change your organization's name, you change your address, and looky, your mission or your scope are the big ones that you definitely should refile your bylaws. I also included in here, but I'm not going to get into, there's some additional considerations that may fall into resubmission. And if you are questionable, you should probably consult a legal counsel. If you're like, I don't want to do it, should I really do it? It's not that hard. I would just go ahead and do it. But if you're like, or if you do a big cleanup and a mass change, I always say just refile. But there are questions in there. We had one just come up with us for the foundation, some renaming of positions, and it falls underneath authority. So we said it's probably something we want to refile. Failure to follow your bylaws. This is, again, part of your legal obligation as a board member. Failure to follow the bylaws puts the board at risk, and it puts the nonprofit at risk. Failure to follow your bylaws, again, puts you as an individual director at individual risk. Your D&O, if you have directors and officers insurance and you fail to follow the bylaws, your D&O policy may not cover you, and you could be liable individually. So it's why the bylaws are important. Again, it's part of you being part of that duty of obedience for the organization. So done with obedience. I'm sorry if we scared everyone. Again, it is just something to stay on top of. I just build it into the calendar. A lot of these things, you just build it into your calendar as an organization to review, to check in on. And again, if you need to do a bylaw scrub, Kathy, myself, we have other entities that have offered, that have really great bylaws, that have offered to mentor, maybe starting up organizations as well. We have resources here for you. Legal counsel is always a good way to go with bylaws, as well as having a legal counsel review them. Next, duty of loyalty in our last section, which is pretty quick. Again, duty of loyalty is where you're going to put this organization's interests before your own personal or professional interests. The big way you're going to do that as a board member is you are going to have a conflict of interest policy for your organization. It's basically, again, to ensure that you, as part of the governing body, that you, again, are putting the organization first. And if there's something gray in here, that you are going to identify it and bring it to the table and present it up front. Again, it may be where a person's interests are at odds with the financial interests of the organization. I'm going to go to a really simple example. A really simple example is, as a PTO, which is a nonprofit, we had another parent that was an officer that had a t-shirt business. We love for our schools to have the swag with all of the blinged out Puma or Bruin or Trojan on it. And everybody said, well, Betty over here, she's got a great, let's just use Betty to do all of our swag. That is a conflict of interest. You can get around that as long as you identify that conflict of interest. And in this case, Betty puts in a bid along with Joe's t-shirt sack puts in a bid, and you get a few bids. And if Betty still comes in as the best thing, you have dealt with this conflict of interest, which usually a conflict of interest policy has with, if there is a conflict, how do you work through it? How do you step through it? How do you investigate it? And how do you set it aside and work through it? So if there is a conflict of interest, and it's going to have the details to do that, but that is a very simple conflict of interest that everybody thinks it's no big deal. She's great. She's here. She knows she's got our logo. We're good to go. it's not good to go, because potentially Betty could be seen as putting her own financial interests in front of the organization. They could have gotten a better deal somewhere else. Somebody could, again, it's that last sentence there. It usually arises when it has to do with compensation or business or benefits for an officer, director, and a trustee. And in this case, it's Betty getting financial gain out of being the go-to person for the swag for that school. Conflict of interest, again, if it is brought up, it could actually cause you to lose your tax exempt status if you're found guilty of not dealing with a conflict of interest. It could be actually, again, there could be legal ramifications. A board of directors could be held liable for overlooking it and not dealing with it and not addressing it. Again, if you take it and you address it and it is documented, that is fine. But a failure to just not deal with it is not an excuse, and you could be held liable for that. You could be held, again, personally liable as well and be a subject of a suit if you have violated this duty of loyalty and it is seen that way. So again, a couple of things. I know it's a scary thing, and it can be simple. Something as simple, again, as swag. Usually you'll only see this come to light if it's something much, much bigger. And so I have included in here under a closer look, conflict, if it opens up for us. In here is a few conflict of interests and ethics policies for California nonprofits. So if you don't have one, here's, and I believe this one has several examples that you can pull from and utilize whatever is best for your organization, depending on how deep you want to go. Usually a conflict of interest is signed every year with the election of the board. So after you elect a board, if you elect a new board in November, when that board terms on in January, usually that's, again, part of your calendar. That first meeting in January, everybody signs the conflict of interest. Usually there's a place there that you're like, oh, there's something kind of here that might get a little funky, you know, and you'll list it out there. So again, the closer look is going to give you some sample templates if you would like to utilize them. The other thing is, as far as, again, putting the organization above yourself, is confidentiality. This is, you know, as far as being transparent and being confidential, it's actually, you're actually required to say that you have, confidentiality for your organization in place whenever you do some of your filings. I know that and I put this one in here, and I've actually gotten this question a lot lately, as far as open meetings and confidentiality around a nonprofit. California does have what's called sunshine laws, which is in regard to open meeting laws that require certain nonprofits to at least have some portions of their board meetings to be open. And usually this is in a case where it has to do with government funding. So school boards, libraries, if they have an operating board, those generally have to have some of or a portion of their meeting open to the public because they use governmental funds. So it's always good to know, as far as, if your organization should have open meetings, or are you okay to be closed meetings? The big one where we find people getting maybe hung up on confidentiality, and we get it a lot here at the El Dorado Community Foundation, is your donors. Your donors their records and their addresses are generally kept private. A lot of times with your donors, they will even mark themselves as anonymous. But a lot of times people are like, can we get your mailing list? No, you can't have our mailing lists. You can't have our donor list. That is confidential information. So we must protect it as such. And you, as a little nonprofit, of course, you want to thank your donors and stuff. You're going to send them thank you letters. But as far as sharing it in public, if they don't want it out there, sharing their information is not legally acceptable. You want to, even if you have newsletters and stuff and you're sending people newsletters, you want to always give opt-outs for people, again, to protect their personal information. With regards to confidentiality, I gave you 2 samples down here. If you don't have confidentiality signings for your board, again, this is something, again, conflict of interest, January meeting. If you elected your officers in November, they term on in January, have them sign the conflict of interest, have them sign the letter of confidentiality. And I have some sample policies in here that you would have them sign. This one's from Board Source. It's got the key elements as far as what should be in there, and then it's got some samples. So if you don't have this, you definitely want to capture it. It's something that's being expected. Get this in place. Again, it's really simple. Once you have it in place, again, you just sign it every January. It is filed with whatever officer, usually a secretary might be keeping your confidentiality forms. Keep them on file for your organization. Those are the big 2. There's more, but these are the big 2 as a board member legally you should be aware of, that you should be taking action on to, again, do that duty of loyalty, putting the organization first and protecting the organization and its information. If you breach confidentiality, it could lead to a termination of employment. Usually if a nonprofit has staff, we as staff here at the foundation, we will sign confidentiality agreements again. So if somebody calls me and asks for our thing, that I know better than to do that. As a board member, breaching confidentiality, usually you're a volunteer, it will terminate your service. Obviously, the biggies, as far as a breach in confidentiality, could lead to a civil suit. It could lead to a criminal suit if financial gain was made. Again, if you gave your donor list and information to somebody for something and they got financial gain out of it, this could actually turn into a criminal suit. But the biggest thing on this, oh my goodness, is a tarnished reputation, which may not seem as big as a lawsuit or a fine, but a tarnished reputation for a nonprofit has serious long-term consequences and stuff. And as we all know, in our county, we're small and stuff. And so this is a big deal as far as a breach of confidentiality. So again, the 2 things as a board member that you should do to definitely put a good foothold into your duty of loyalty is having a conflict of interest sign and having a confidentiality sign for your organization. Again, we're going to quickly review because this is going to come back into play. Last week, we focused on the 3 fundamental legal responsibilities for being a board member. I'm going to do a quick review because I'm going to bring it up again as we go throughout today. Yes, last week, even though, yes, we got in some details of the governance and stuff, now we're really going to get into the meat of being a board member. When you go to meetings, when you're making decisions, the F word, fundraising, things like that, which is usually an expectation of board. We'll get into policies and procedures again a little bit. Last week, we talked to 2, really in particular, our conflict of interest and our confidentiality one. We're going to talk about some other really important ones according to the IRS, as well as the Council on Nonprofits that are recommended for nonprofits. We'll get into budgets a little bit, why you do them and how you set and you manage them. And if we get to it again, we want to get a little bit into some of the softer stuff. I like to call it this. This is kind of a slang term these days that's used on social media. If somebody posts something that you completely agree with, that you are completely behind, you'll see people just repost it and put this. And that is kind of the thing that's out there today, especially used in social media, that's saying, I support this, I love this. So how do we get you guys good at this and getting your stuff reshared? And then goals and the setting of goals and using what's called SMART goals. And also, we're going to revisit those of you who participated last week. Now that we've gone through this all, your cares, concerns, and compliments. Again, feel free. Chris is going to be grabbing questions from the chat. Kathy as well is going to be online today answering things as well. I will probably get to the bulk of them at the end of the meeting if we have any. So let's get into this. We're going to start with Again, a review of your legal fundamental responsibilities, duty of care. That is where your decision-making came in. And we talked about some things last week that help you make good decisions. We talked about the budget. We talked about your mission statement, all helping you make good decisions. Today, we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of how do you make a decision as a nonprofit board member. Duty of obedience was that mind-numbing legal responsibilities of last week, your registrations with the IRS, the DOJ, the SOS, the Secretary of State, all of those. And then duty of loyalty is where we got into the confidentiality and the conflict of interest last week of making sure that whenever you're making a decision for this organization, that you put your personal and your professional interests those are kind of in the back seat. You're bringing those skills and that knowledge to the table, but whenever you're making a decision, you're making it for the organization's best interest, not for you. So we're going to start out with meetings, because as a board member, you go to meetings, whether it's once a month, once a quarter, and stuff. The legal responsibility in California is that you have at least one meeting a year. But I think all of you know, we generally go to more. I sit on a couple. One, I only meet once a quarter. Another one is once a month, except because we're related to the schools, we take the summers off. But I do go to a lot of meetings. So we're going to talk about how to be prepared, how to participate in the meeting, and then post-preliminary. What are your responsibilities after the meeting is over? So meeting preparedness. It's going to help the stage for all meetings to be productive. They can get to their outcomes, that they can be strategic in nature. This one seems very simple, but we are all busy and we all get caught up in it. It is really important to RSVP in advance to your presiding officer of your director, so they're aware if there are going to be absences. We know things come up. But where this comes into play is if you do not RSVP and there are multiple people absent, you may not have a quorum at your meeting in order to make a decision. That's why it's something simple, but it's actually really, really important for nonprofits. The bylaws may even have in them your failure to come as a board member. If you have so many unexcused absences where you just don't let them know, it may actually say in your bylaws that you could be released from your service after so many unexcused absences. I have sat on a board where we did ask a board member to step off because they were not coming regularly. And the board sent them a letter and said, according to our bylaws, we must ask at this time that you kindly resign or we'll need to take action. So, but the biggest thing is making sure that you have a quorum there that can do the work. Another really important thing is to make sure you receive and review your materials beforehand. So you understand what action is going to be taken in the meeting. If there's going to be decisions that are going to need to be made, usually almost always there is something that's going to need, even something as simple as approving the agenda or approving the minutes requires a quorum. And therefore it requires you to read those minutes in advance. Your bylaws will usually say how much in advance your meeting minutes need to be posted. I know a lot of people get hung up on the Brown Act. The Brown Act has to do with organizations that deal in governmental funds. So for example, school boards, library boards, they are all required to post their minutes so far in advance due to governmental standards that have been set for them. Usually you'll find most nonprofits that aren't beholden to the Brown Act follow the same rule though. They generally in their bylaws, it will say 72 business hours in advance. You do really, really want to try to do that, especially if you're a secretary. I am a secretary right now on 2 organizations. And again, if I don't send the minutes to the board members until 24 hours in advance, it's going to be really hard for them to review and fulfill this obligation of being ready and being prepared. So you do want to, if your secretary is a good one and they get it to you in advance as they should, the agenda, the minutes and stuff, make sure you review them. Another one in this day and age is make sure you, if you're participating virtually, make sure you've tested your technology in advance. That's part of being prepared. I'm going to pop open my closer look real quickly here. My closer look on this one is an agenda template. Again, a lot of boards will have this, so should just get you familiar. And again, for any of you that are secretaries out here, these are the things that you want to make sure you capture in your agenda template. And you're going to make sure that you carry these over as well to your minutes template. You're going to have your organization. Plaster your mission statement all over everything. Again, we said that mission statement is used in decision making. It's your guiding principle. So have your mission statement on your agenda. You want to say what kind of meeting it is on your agenda, whether it is your annual meeting where it's going to be election of officers, or it's just a standing board meeting, or maybe it's a board retreat. You want to have the kind of meeting in there, the date, the time of the meeting, and the location of the meeting. If it is a virtual meeting, you'll want to ensure that you include your login information here. These are all things that are all good things to have in your meeting. One is a call to order. Because actually per guidelines, you want to have when your meeting started. That way, if anyone ever calls in a question, did you really have a meeting? That you can refer back to the minutes, say, yes, we had a meeting on this date and it was called to order at this time. You want to do a roll call. So again, this is allowing you to make sure that you have established your quorum for your meeting. And you'll see whenever I share with you a minutes template, and you want to make sure this is accurate. But by doing a roll call, you're making sure that you have the board members present to have a meeting. You'll review and amend your last meeting minutes, and you'll review, amend, or approve your agenda. Now, I do have a bullet here. You could actually do these through what's called a consent agenda, which again, if things come out in advance and your board members are expected to review them in advance, you could do this in one fell swoop, in one fell motion at the meeting. If you have an executive director, usually your executive director goes next and gives a report. Then you usually roll into committee reports. I like to put finance first because, again, in order to make good decisions later in the meeting, I like to have finance first. I like to know what money is in the bank, what money's coming in, what money's going out. So I love to have either my finance committee report first or have my financial review. If you have a bookkeeper or somebody delivering it, just a treasurer, I like to have that first. So again, you are creating that foundation in that meeting to have a good meeting and to make good decisions. Then I roll into other committee reports, whether it's a program, a fundraising, a governance. I like to have a place for old business. If there's anything that doesn't necessarily fall into committees, but you want to discuss, this is a place I love to go over if someone was assigned a task. And take it up there in old business. You know, did you get this done? New business would be a place where you would, if you added something at the beginning of the meeting to the agenda and it didn't naturally fall into one of the reports, you would put that into the new business of area of the agenda. This is also a place that if you have time to keep you on task, I like to put parking lot things. So if you start to go off, but it's something that's really important, you're getting off topic, but you all acknowledge that it's something that you want to discuss, move it to the parking lot, to the new business or open section of the meeting and have the discussion there. And again, it seems like something small, but you need to adjourn the meeting and you need to capture that in the minutes. So again, if somebody ever called in the question, did you really meet? Did this really happen at this time? You have, the meeting happened, it happened here, it happened at this time, it began here, and it ended here. Especially if you end early and somebody was going to show up for an action item and you're like, I'm sorry, we actually ended a little early, so we were done by this time. So capturing that is super, super important. So I wanted to share an agenda with you. And this again will come out to you guys. The next one is meeting participation. So you've prepared for the meeting, you've read your agenda, you've read the previous minutes, you are ready to go, you know what decision making is going to happen. So again, your participation is really, really important. Deliberations that you're having should all be future oriented, they should be proactive, looking forward, and it should be based on trust and good judgment. Again, you're using those things, we're giving you foundation for you to make good judgments. You should be aware of every major action taken in a meeting as a board member and stuff. When did you approve your budget? What was that budget? This is the biggest one. And I actually got a call from a friend of mine that's on a board and stuff. And she's always been a good she'll be there. She'll be another body in the room. Sure, I'll be there to vote. But because she hasn't been comfortable in her knowledge, and there's maybe been a couple of really strong people on the board who seem to know everything, she would just sit back and follow their lead. Well, if they motioned and they seconded, then it must be good, and I'm going to go with it too. Non-management is the quickest way to trouble. So if you have a couple of people that know things really well and you're just following their lead, try to reach out to get some more assistance, ask some more questions, because just trusting those couple of people that they know it all, it's okay. If they say it's okay, I'm sure it's okay. That is the quickest way to trouble. It's always, meetings are tough. You always want to, stay engaged. Usually, and I will admit, I am not the best of this, especially if I have an evening meeting, and whenever my children were younger, of turning off my phone or setting it aside or having a breakthrough in case my kids needed to call me, so it's not sitting there buzzing all the time. Help stay on topic. Again, use the parking lot to move things to the parking lot so you stay on topic. Use inclusive language. A lot of we's. You are there as a board. You're operating as a we versus an I, and always assume positive intent. That's one of the things I even teach my kids these days. If somebody says that, well, that, they said this, it sounded like this. I'm like, you don't know what that person is, what history is behind it or what experience behind it. I'm like, always assume that whatever is being stated there's positive intent behind it. Be considerate. Again, limit the multitasking. And the big one is respect and support the majority decision. So if there is a decision made in a meeting where you choose to abstain or you are a no, at the end of the day, the majority decision is one that needs to be supportive. I actually had, again, the person this weekend I spoke with, something had been passed in a meeting. And then she was getting a text from a board member outside the meeting saying she wanted to call another emergency meeting to revisit the vote. She was not happy, even though she was the only one who was. And I said, did you capture it in the minutes and stuff? And yes. And you do really need to respect and support the majority decision. I like to share a little story here. As most of you know, I worked at Intel for a very long time, not for a very long time, but for about 8 years. And one of the trainings that we went through as a new employee was constructive confrontation. And there is a whole section on there of what's called disagree and commit. At Intel, it is okay to disagree, but at the end of the day, once a decision is made, you commit to support that decision so the company can move forward. So that's a really important one. Post-preliminary. So after you've done your thing in your meeting, and you have, have your outcomes and everything noted, you're not done. You will get minutes. You want to make sure those minutes are complete and accurate. And the reason is because those minutes actually serve as a legal document. So again, if something were to be called into question, those minutes can be summoned up to make sure that you had the meeting and to see who all was involved. Completeness, if you're using Robert's Rules of Order, your minutes should include what kind of meeting it is. And now you saw earlier, you're going to see a lot of these things carry over because I love to use the agenda as the template for my minutes. So I literally can just carry things over. Your minutes should have your date, your time, your location. You should have the name of the organization that's meeting. You should have the beginning and the end time. You should have absence of the regular chair or the secretary, especially noted, and who filled in their absence. And then you need to have attendance. Again, this is allowing you to establish your quorum as far as who was actually there and voting. And we will get into what a quorum is whenever we get into the next little bit here. But you want to capture the names. You also want to capture guests as well that are in attendance for a meeting. Minutes should be a digestible summary, really noting any decisions, results, and points. It should not be a verbatim of what is said in the meeting. And you'll see whenever I share a template with you here in a minute, my template is pretty small and pretty contracted. Again, it's to keep from it being too elaborate. Usually, if there is a discussion about something, I will say, a discussion was held about this topic. And then I move on to, and the following items were motioned. But I don't get into all the points that led you to that decision unless it is something having to do with legal financial that should be captured. Votes that are not unanimous. You always should list who dissented or abstained. And if there was a conflict of interest for the reason for that person abstaining. So that's super important, again, to capture that. Again, if somebody comes in, well, I heard so-and-so did not like that. You are correct. So-and-so did vote no on this. However, the rest were yes votes. They were yay votes. You also want to look in case you do capture tasks in your meetings. I know a lot of people here on this call have been on boards with me, or I've helped guide you with boards. I love, and this is part of the intel in me, of capturing there, we capture what's called ARs, or action requireds, of tasks that need to be done outside of the meeting and who they were assigned to. If you're a type of board that runs that way, where you do capture action required in your minutes, you want to review them to make sure that you are aware of things that were assigned to you. So again, I'm going to pop open a quick closer look so you can see how things have kind of mirrored. It's opening. And again, this template will be out there if it's something that you want to take for your organization and utilize. Again, all the things that I just said for Robert's Rules of Order are in here. For your organization name, I usually put a logo. Again, it's part of capturing your identity and starting to market and brand yourself. The kind of meeting, the date of the meeting, the location, the fact that these are a minutes document. And again, here's where you see who is present, who is absent, and who are the guests present. I also like to note, because we will get into electronic actions here in a minute, if you're doing a hybrid meeting where some people are in person and some people are on Zoom, I've even gone as far into some of my meetings here, especially during COVID, of putting, beside their name, if they were not present, but they were over Zoom beside their name. I especially do it with the critical roles or the critical presentations in the meeting, like the budgets and the finance. I did have a meeting just last month where the treasurer presented virtually. So I actually put that she was available over Zoom. Again, there you can see it. Your meeting is called to order at this time. You do your roll call. Again, you get into your consent agenda if you have one, otherwise you're going to break it out. And here's where you see, because it's going to follow exactly your agenda, I have this template pulled up at every meeting and I just start typing away and I don't have to recreate. I'm boxed in. I'm very confined as far as what I can type and how much space I have. So therefore, I'm going to keep it very succinct. And I'm going to capture things. I like to capture, if it is a committee, who the presenter is for that committee, and write it up there as well. Again, and I put notes in there. You want to keep it very succinct. Old business, parking lot. I like to include the next meeting on there. And then again, the adjournment. So those are kind of some of the BKMs, best known methods for your agendas. So that is after your meeting is over. Decision-making. So I said that it's important to have a quorum to make decisions. So now we're going to dig into decision-making. Decorum, as far as decision-making. Decorum is defined as a behavior that is considered correct, polite, and respectful. So as a rule of thumb, when you are making decisions, because again, my call this weekend was, do we really have to have this actioned, and do we really need to attend to this in a meeting? Because it had to do with putting logos for a sponsor on certain things. You do want to make sure, as a rule of thumb, that if it is anything significant financially, legally, or program related, that it is captured in a meeting and it is done in a board approval. Now, this discussion about logos and stuff, they do have a fundraising committee. So I told her, I said, you could kick that down to your fundraising committee. No, this doesn't need to be at the board. Now, if they need to defer to the board because they can't make a decision, then that is fine. But I said, no, this isn't necessarily something that needs to be taken on by the board. So having those discussions if you have subcommittees. Another one that I was asked to bring up by one of my coworkers here is decorum as far as whenever you are having your annual meeting and you are voting in newly slated directors. Usually, you are going to have your annual meeting. Say if you're on a calendar year, you'll have your annual meeting in November, and those new board members will start in January. It gets really awkward if you have the new board members at the meeting that they're being elected at. People are not going to be able to have an open and honest communication about those persons. So, and she's seen this occur now a couple of times. So she asked that I please add this into the decorum section. Is again, if you are having your annual meeting and you're voting in, don't have those newly slated directors present at the meeting. Invite them to the next meeting. Or if you have business that you need to attend to, ask them to show up at a later time during the meeting once they are elected. So you can have that open discussion about who's been slated. Again, we've already discussed this as far as conflict of interest. Whenever it comes to decisions, it is unethical for you to use your position of as a director to further your private interests or investments. Again, you need to remain loyal to any decisions, even if you voted against them. It is also, as I just shared with the one that happened this meeting, it is bad etiquette for you to lobby outside of the meeting, even especially after the meeting and the decision is made. Again, consensus means that all board members have the responsibility for that collective decision. So you're going to, again, you may disagree, but you are going to commit and move forward. Quorum, that fun word. It is the minimum number of nonprofit board members that must be present at any meeting to validate and implement the proceedings. If you do not have a quorum, and this has happened to me a lot during COVID, the meeting generally becomes informational and minutes nothing formal can be decided, and you might be able to have a discussion as a board, but it's not an official meeting. Under California law, a quorum is defined as a majority. However, your organization's bylaws might set a higher quorum limit. So it's something you want to look at. You know, you might be 3/4 to be a quorum. So you want to make sure in your bylaws what is a quorum, and whoever is running your meeting needs to be aware of what that quorum number is. And usually the second most important person that needs to know is the secretary, as they're recording it, so they can as well call into question if you do not have enough people. This is another one as far as quorum goes. It is important to note that in the state of California, directors are required to vote in person. Now we'll talk about electronic votes here in a moment, but basically what this means is you are not allowed to send a vote by proxy, which means you're not going to be in attendance. So if I knew a decision was coming up and Kathy and I sat on a board together, I could not send Kathy an email saying, Kathy, I'm not going to be there, but on item number 5, could you please vote yay for me? That's not allowed underneath California corporate nonprofit corporate law. You must be in person, no proxy voting allowed. So that's something important to note regarding a quorum. Now, electronic action. This is one that has changed a lot with COVID and continues to flow a little bit. While it's common practice for nonprofits to take an action by email, it may not be permissible unless you have duly met the meeting requirements or you have unanimous written consent. I think the second piece of this is the most important, is basically if you are going to do something over email, it must be a unanimous vote. If you have anyone who wishes to abstain or wishes to be a nay, you cannot take that action up. It will need to be taken to a live meeting. So it is something, if you need to do something and you need to do it quick and you want to do it over email, hopefully it is something that you know that everyone is going to be behind and supportive of, because it does require a unanimous written consent. You can do it over email. If there is a board member who might have something where they need to abstain due to the fact that they've got something an interest involved, for example, maybe it's one of their programs that they need some money for, they can, and that's okay. But again, basically, you don't want to use this. It should only be used in an emergency. And you want to make sure it's going to be unanimous. Writing for legal, just to put it out here, even though I don't think we use it very much anymore, but it is available for telegraphic and other communications. What I like to do to cover my butt as a secretary, if I do an electronic action over email, is I revisit it at the next meeting agenda, and I make sure that I remind everyone and put it in record at a live meeting that we did this over email. And then I actually attach copies of the board members' consents that happened over email to the minutes. That way you're really covering yourself. You've got it all captured. So that is the deal with email votes, because I know it especially happened more and more with COVID. All right, I'll do a quick pause. Kathy, we doing good?
I'm doing good.
Awesome. All right, Kathy's probably going to chime in a little bit now on this next one. The next one has to do with the F word, but not the F word that you might think, but it may be one to us as board members. It's fundraising. It's probably one of the most uncomfortable things that people like to say. I want to be on the board. Do I have to ask for money? Usually it's part of your board roles and responsibilities. So we're going to go into that and knowing the rules for fundraising. Again, fundraising is a way of gathering voluntary contributions of money or other resources. So just so you know, it isn't always necessarily always cash and stuff, but it could be other resources that you need. And that's where we'll get into these connections. Usually it is one of the roles and responsibilities of the board of directors. So it's really important for you to have a strong understanding of what your role is or your responsibilities as a board member. And maybe, yes, that you do need to solicit for donations and gifts. You may even be asked to make a personal donation or gift as a member of board. I will admit there are some grants that you applied for that people will ask, do you have a 100% giving board? That means, does your board give money to your cause? Is that an expectation? Kind of, it's one of those put your money where your mouth is. Well, if you're going to support this, with your effort, they want to see that the board has a little skin in the game. Now, usually on something like this, because I've worked for some very small entities here in the county, where we did have it written that it was a responsibility for our board members to give a financial gift each year. The financial gift could be $1. It was whatever their financial situation allowed them to give at the time. If they gave $1, that is still skin in the game. So therefore, ethically, if I was writing a grant, I could say, yes, my board is a 100% giving board. So we were one that said you give what is appropriate, but for your financial situation, but yes, you do need to give. You may actually serve on a board where there is actually like a $2,500 or $500 annual giving agreement as a board member. So always make sure you're aware of that if you are serving on a board, as far as what your expectations are. A big one, especially in this county, is you might be asked to be on a board because you have a great network and stuff. So they want you to introduce your network to the organization. You might do this through attending events and bringing a guest to introduce your guests from your network to that organization. Almost all of us have fundraisers. And so as a board member, bringing a guest as a friend, introducing them is a way that you are giving back in fundraising possibly. And if your board offers fundraising training, you want to make sure you participate in it as a board member. Some of the best practices for nonprofit board fundraising is obviously when you bring somebody on board, make sure that they get training, make sure that they have, the link to the website, that they know what your sponsorship model looks like, that they are educated of the opportunities that they can offer people whenever they meet them on the street. And that's usually very important whenever you onboard somebody new. Do you do donations online? Do you have PayPal? What do you have? What is available? So educating your board, so whenever they're out there, that they can have educated conversations with potential donors is super important. Continual education is great. There's all kinds of free stuff offered out there, from courses to books as far as fundraising. You don't have to do this alone. Another one that is an easy win for board members is to leverage corporate giving in your board fundraising. I know, for instance, my husband is Intel, and Intel has Benevity, which does matching. So whenever I am usually present in a room, board members are usually very aware. And if they're asking for a campaign, I will usually get a direct line of sight with whoever's presenting saying, and don't forget your corporate matching and, Intel and Benevity, since it's a local one. So being aware of who your audience is and those matching opportunities here in our community. Wells Fargo is another one that is a great one in this space. Blue Cross Blue Shield in our community is another really good one that has sometimes has internal matching programs. So you want to be aware of that as a board member. Again, business type connections, call or lunch with small local business owners and stuff, and think about what other connections in your community might be a good one to connect with from a mission standpoint. I know you guys get sick of me going back to Ag in the Classroom, but obviously a big one for Ag in the Classroom when I was the executive director was tapping into the Farm Bureau, the Christmas tree growers, the apple growers, and connecting to all those that connect with my mission and what we were doing at Ag in the Classroom. That was really important. We would literally sit around and brainstorm, who would be drawn to our mission, and therefore we should garner their support. Another one is making sure that you as a board member are aware of your fundraising toolkit, and maybe it's something that you guys want to spend some time on. Donor databases, it could be a big fancy word for an Excel spreadsheet that you know who has been donating and when that donation came in. Is it time to go out and ask again? I know that I just got pinged by my own treasurer of one of the boards, because she knows that usually this time of the year is whenever I write my donation check, and she actually sent me a little note that said, hey, are you still considering, this normally is the time of the year you consider donating. Are you considering it this year? And here's some wonderful things we've been up to. So she was aware of when I usually donate, but she also knows I'm a busy mom and a worker, so she reached out to me. Software for peer-to-peer fundraising. I will brag for a moment on wonderful one we saw last week out of Hands for Hope, and some software that they're using for peer-to-peer fundraising, and their lockup campaign that they do. And in the community. So those are really good online platforms to allow a board member to easily ask for assistance. I know Andrea Howard's on here, and she was locked up, and therefore having this software and having this very easy way to reach and pull people into a fundraising effort is super nice. Again, communication tools, having an elevator pitch, knowing that you have a Facebook page, knowing those things that are available to you to point people to whenever you meet them is super important. And then donor appreciation and strategies. I like to know if I have asked someone, my treasurers, to let me know that the donation came in, so I can call and say, thank you so much. Or if it is just a friend of mine and they know, hey, we know that you are a good friend with so-and-so, and by the way, they just sent a check for $500, that I can reach out personally to them and ask and appreciate them. And having some strategies around that is super important. I will brag on Hands for Hope again. We just got a beautiful book from them at Christmas here at the foundation, as someone who has supported them, and they have received grants through us. So super nice. Now, the scary stuff. Kathy will probably chime in here. So some commonly overlooked fundraising laws. Again, here we come to your duty of obedience as a board member. And again, your CPA, your bookkeeper and stuff, this is, their space and their knowledge level, but you need to be aware, because again, that duty of obedience, that you are aware that you are following the rules as a board member, because again, you don't want to just go along for the ride. So a couple of things we're going to touch on today really quick, and Bill actually hit this one at the end of last week's training, which is the unrelated business income taxation. So yes, nonprofits usually don't have much to do around taxes unless you are an organization that opens a store to sell something on the side that the proceeds go back into your nonprofit. That is unrelated business income that is taxable. And if you think about it for a minute, we do have a few entities here in our county that have like stores on the side, whether it's a bookstore or it's a thrift store of some type. Those are the types of things that would fall underneath this, this guideline. Fundraising events, this is the one that everybody wants to know about. So whenever it comes to fundraising events, usually these are regulated at the state level. I am just going to go ahead and put it out there that yes, California highly regulates these things at the state level for us. I'm not going to dive too deep into this, but whenever it comes to charity auctions, it is not considered gambling. It is considered a sale of goods. Therefore, you do need to pay very close attention that you're sending out acknowledgement letters. I usually just covered my behind whenever I dealt in this and sent everyone a letter, no matter how much their item, was valued at. Because again, at the end of the day, the valuing of items is usually between the person that donated and their tax preparer. Usually in a letter, I will just say, thank you so much for the donation of your rental house for 1 week in Mendocino, California. Stop. I don't value it for them. They value it with their tax preparer, not me, and stuff. So usually, again, because I don't want to get hung up in who said what was what value, I just put out a letter and I put it out to everyone that donated something, whether it's a $5 jar of honey, again, to that home in Mendocino. This one, I actually just got a call on this one this morning. So it's sale of goods. Are there tax implications because this is a sale of goods? I would say research and be knowledgeable. And Chris is going to put a link in the chat right now that was shared with me this morning by an organization that was questioning this exact thing. And it's a webinar that's being done next Monday at 9 a.m. By one of our California government entities that is literally going to get into the do's and don'ts around taxes when it comes to a spaghetti feed, a raffle, an auction. And I would highly suggest taking that. We're hoping Kathy is signed up for it for our entity, and she's going to attend and get some more knowledge in this space. So I'll be honest, I'm punting a little bit on this one, but we are going to work on beefing up ourselves as well. Because again, California is constantly, we all admit we are heavily regulated and things are constantly changing. So I'm not exactly comfortable going into the details on this one today. But there is that webinar that's available. And again, one of us hopefully will be attending it as well to get some more information. It is always important to make sure that, your auctions and your audited financial statements are always looking at what's called the GAAP, the General Accepted Accounting Principles. So if you have a CPA or you have a bookkeeper that's using GAAP principles, they're normally going to be really knowledgeable as far as what is the latest up to date and stuff in regards to this area. The other big one that people like to call Kathy and I about is raffles. And we touched on this a bit last week, and we said we would get to it this week because raffles are part of the DOJ. So when you want to have a raffle, you need to register to have a raffle beforehand. And I'm going to show you how simple it is to register. My closer looks today is I am going to share with you. I'm going to open up. I see that it's opening up. Here it comes. I'm going to share with you what a raffle registration looks like. So that way you aren't too scared going forward. So this is what a raffle registration looks like. This is for the Ponderosa High School Foundation. And it's very, very simple. It's got all your information. It's going to have your EIN number. And look what, you better have registered with the DOJ because it's going to ask for your state it's going to ask for your registration number. I've actually had organizations who've tried to get a raffle, who've tried to register for a raffle that weren't even registered with the DOJ. And of course it got kicked back. There's just some boxes as far as your tax exempt status and how you qualified as your tax exempt status, super easy. And then literally it's this easy, propose dates for your raffle. If you're not quite sure, it doesn't have to be exact. If you think you might do one at this time and you decide not to later, it's okay. They just want to know, again, your proposed dates. They're not going to hold you fast and true to, did you have one in February? Did you have one in March? Did you have one in May? This is proposed. This simple, signed by my treasurer, submitted with your check for $20 and off you go. Yes, Kathy.
Real quick, this is an annual thing that you have to do every year, and it's a weird annual date. It's September to August, I believe, right, Avis? So if your raffle is after September, you need to fill it out for that year. Like if you have one in June and in September, or June and October, you're going to need to fill it out. That one's going to fit in one year and one's going to fit in the other year. And don't forget to do it every year, because if you get behind, that's when you have to catch up before they grant it.
Yeah, and you can see that date timeline up at the top there. The registration period is between September 1 to August 31. And I think I bragged on my treasurer before. Look at the date that the DOJ received ours, and it was marked September 2nd. So she is always very on it as far as when it's going to be sent in. So it's super easy. So don't be scared anymore. You can do it. So again, you're going to need to report it after it's over. So after your year has run its course, you are going to report. So I actually put in here what a report looks like. Again, it's not that scary to do. So we're going to pull up.
It is not that scary. Avis, it's not that scary, but some people don't realize in the state of California, you do have to follow the 90-10 rule or you are in trouble. The 90-10 rule, which is on that slide, is really simple. 90% of the money you bring in has got to go back to your charitable contributions. You can't spend more than 10% on the prize. You can't pay more than 10% of the money to people who are helping you with it. You can't spend 10% or
Kathy, I just hung up. Are you hung up?
I think Kathy is frozen.
Oh,
Yeah.
Here we come back.
Kathy's frozen.
Okay, it's Kathy. Oh, I love her animated. She's not going to be happy when she sees that screen. Please, Chris, grab a screenshot of that so we can share it later over lunch. So yeah, so Kathy's, and I'll go back to that slide here in a second. That is super, super important. That 90-10 rule. And here's where you can see with the Ponderosa High School Foundation. Again, this is our report for the year that I just showed you the registration for. You don't have to list. You'll see that you don't list whether you did those raffles in February, March, April, like I said. What you're doing is you're just reporting your year end, which is August 31st, 2022. And here's where you can see that 90-10. We obviously were well okay with this. We basically made $1,658.11, and our costs were only $31. It was probably that we had to buy some raffle tickets, or maybe we had to buy some ribbon for something for the raffle prize or a basket. That's all that it was. So hence we easily hit the 90-10 rule. That's how simple this report is. Super, super simple. Just a few more questions. You know, did you meet the 90-10? Super, super easy. Signed off and sent it in. So don't be scared of this report. Super easy. So back to our slide again. I don't want to scare anybody with it, but there is the penal code around the 90-10. Now the big question we get is, well, what about a 50-50? I see it all the time. I see it out at these events. People are doing a 50-50. 50-50s are technically, for most nonprofits, is going to be illegal. Oh, we lost Kathy. Her internet's down. So 50-50 is one where you donate at the event and they're saying 50% is going to go to a winner and 50% is going to go back to whatever organization that it is establishing. You see this a lot. I see it at River Cats games. It's okay at River Cats games because this has actually been okay for the Major League Sports raffle. It is not okay for the majority of the nonprofits outside of these Major League sporting events. It is considered gambling. So it is illegal. If anyone is on here, I've especially been asked by our school entities to be aware that if you are in an organization that supports our local schools, even though you are not directly tied to the schools and their EIN, you are potentially giving money into their programs from potentially a 50-50 raffle. It can actually come back to bite the school or the school district in an audit. So again, it really is one you really want to steer clear of, whether you're associated with schools or not. Now I do have a bit of fun news. As I was doing research for this, I did find out that charity poker nights are okay. But there are certain rules about them as far as how long they can be in an evening, what the pot prizes can be. So if you want to do a charity poker night, the answer is yes, but you're gonna need to register it, and there are going to be certain rules that you're going to need to follow. And then I included another link on there about other controlled games and stuff as well. Another one that I got a call about last year that I'll just toss out was a gun raffle. Again, it is legal. You need to look into the actual, the ownership, the transfer of the ownership and everything having to do with gun ownership laws and selling or gifting of a gun and stuff, because there are certain things that you want to be careful of. But we did have a local nonprofit last year that called us about raffling off a gun. So it is allowable, but there are certain steps and certain rules that you do want to follow in the transfer of the ownership of that gun in order to make it happen. So there we go on some of the big ones about fundraising. And again, whenever it comes to those taxes and stuff, I highly advise taking a look at that webinar next week and seeing if you're available for that. Kathy, so I think she's still off. I was going to say, anything else to add? All right, so now we're going to roll into policies and procedures. Again, as a board member, you may sign some of these, but you should be aware of them. So we're going to dig into these a little bit, and I'm going to go into which ones the IRS wants to make sure that you have, and then also just some other good to haves as a nonprofit if this is something that your space operates in. So policies, you kind of got this just from last week's presentation, but policies are basically your operational guidelines for an organization. The policies are there to protect and steer the staff, if there's staff involved, and the board to fulfill your mission for the organization. It is a reference tool as well. Did you guys see I'm sinking again? There goes my chair again. I'm gonna have to sit up. It is a reference tool to allow you to make sure you're making ethical decisions. Because again, policies tend to align so much to what is correct legally. It is nice to have them to refer back to as far as making ethical decisions. And often, like I said, it can paraphrase the law and stuff. So it's super, super important. It also may include the protocol that you're going to follow in doing something to prepare, to make sure that you diminish potential harmful situations. A really simple one that I like to give in this example is even with small PTOs, parent-teacher organizations that are nonprofits, a policy may be around when do you need 2 signatures on a check? What is prudent and what is right to make sure that you diminish any potential improper behavior or any liability to your organization. Usually the smaller the bank account is for an organization, $250 may be a big deal if misappropriated for your organization. You might want to have a policy that you have 2 signers for a check over 250. If it's a bigger organization, where you don't have a lot of little checks going out, you may have bigger checks going out, it may be more, $500, $1,000, but that would be a type of a policy that you would have in place to diminish that. If you have a debit card for your organization, who has it? When is it allowed to be used? How do you double check those type of things? Policies are something that you don't just put in place. You want to make sure you review them periodically and you update them. We're doing that right now here at the foundation as part of our accreditation. So we review them and make sure that they're all up to date with the latest in legal standings. So it's something that you do want to review periodically. Now's a great time coming out of COVID. Did you find that things needed to operate a little bit differently during COVID? And maybe it's something you want to carry forward and therefore change the policy. Once adopted, policies should be certified or signed by your board of director, and the date of which you basically pass that policy in a board meeting, it needs to be dated. So everyone knows, when is the last time you reviewed this? When was it put into working order for your organization? And then you want to make sure it's either kept by the secretary or staff in a readily accessible location. At the foundation, ours are all up on our shared drive, and you'll find, I shared last week, a lot of ours are even out there for public consumption on our website. At the bottom of our webpage, you'll see policies, and you can click on there and see the foundations as well. So you want the more transparency, the better, is what we always say. So you'll want to have it out there. So the IRS does not require that you have these. There's not a checkbox that says, I have these. Or there's not that you have, I shouldn't say that. You don't have to submit them. However, as if you're an organization that files a 990, especially in the part 6 of the 990, there are a lot of questions that basically lead to that if you do not have these things that you cannot answer a yes with. So basically they want to see that you have if you have an executive director, that you have an executive director's compensation policy, investments, whistleblower, document retention and destruction, conflicts of interest, and fundraising. And then this one that doesn't have a link into it, documenting governance decisions. This means that you are doing proper agendas and minutes, and that you are capturing things correctly when it comes to the governance and the decision making of your organization. Again, they're not going to ask for you to submit these, but the way you answer certain questions in that part 6 of your 990 says you have these in place and that you are following them. Whenever you guys get this presentation, each one of these blue links is a link to more information, and almost all of these have samples if you need them, from all organizations that we're really happy and really like what they do. I also have asterisks here. So the IRS says these. If you want to go one step further, the Council of Nonprofits, if it has an asterisk beside it, these are ones that we're like, yes, we agree as well. These are super, super important. And that's where I have a second page of things here. And there's a few asterisks from the Council of Nonprofits that they suggest that you have as well. So additional policies to consider. The top 2, gift acceptance and joint venture policies. And joint venture may not apply to you. And again, I gave you a link on this to decide it is. But usually if you're working in partnership with another organization or another entity, then you will want a joint venture policy. Those are the 2 big ones on here that, again, the National Council of Nonprofits think that these are really must-have for nonprofits. But there are also a list of other ones here as well that you could consider, depending on how big your organization does, what do you deal in, everything from treasury to procurement, operating reserves, which we all hope to have, which is one thing that's really tough for a nonprofit to attain, but your goal is to always have a minimum of 6 months of operating reserves. How you close your finances and reporting. cybersecurity, IT things as well. This is one that, that has just came out of the, the last few years, but crypto as well. I mean, I know not probably many of us are dealing with crypto, but if it continues to grow, and maybe something that we need to look into as far as crypto and accepting cryptocurrency, employment and equipment. So again, those two must-haves up there, I have links for you to go out and look and check them out and see, again, some samples and stuff out there as far as policies go. All right, I'm going to check my clock real quick I can't see my clock without a stop share. So I'm gonna stop share real quick. Oh, we're doing pretty good. Oh, and I get to see who else here. Hi, everyone. Give everybody a break. I know this is a lot. We're gonna launch into budgets. So again, these are me giving you the little detailed things that you're gonna do over and over and over again as a board member. So we've already gone through how to get ready for a meeting, how to make decisions in a meeting, how you're going to fundraise, some points to know about fundraising. Now let's get into budgets a little bit, because it is something that you're going to help the organization and you're going to approve as a board member, and then you're going to watch it as the year goes along as well. So why do you have a budget? And then setting and managing a budget for an organization. Ooh, went too fast. Okay, so a budget by definition is a guide that can help your nonprofit plan for the future and assess your current financial health by planning for income and expenses. Budgets are super important. You have been given money by the public in most cases, and it's your responsibility then to utilize that money in a responsible manner in the best interest of the nonprofit. Again, you're going to leave your personal things aside, and you are going to put the nonprofit first in your decision making whenever it comes to budget. Sound familiar? We're talking about duty of loyalty again. The government actually, even though it feels sometimes with all these regulations that, oh my goodness, they were trying to do good, or this is so hard to do good given all these regulations. They really, really do want nonprofits to remain sustainable. Even though some days it may not feel like it, for as long as possible. So it is, whenever it comes, it's super important for you to know, your rules around your budgets and your money. And whenever we look at an example here in a minute, you'll understand that, where are there rules in a budget? Why, it's, money in, money out. And we've already discussed some things, but I'm actually going to get into here in a minute. Whenever you're looking at your budget documents, what are some things you should be thinking of whenever it comes to duty of care? Donors are always interested in budgets as far as, how do you spend things? And we discussed this a little bit last week in overhead, and how some people can be very sensitive to, why are you spending this much in overhead? When, you should be, why, you should be spending so much in program. It is a shifting thing right now, as far as people realizing that you do need to put money into overhead in order to run a nonprofit, and in order to make money to run a nonprofit. But by you having good budgeting principles, it does show that you're on it, you're on top of it. Yes, we approved our budget for this year, and that's super important. Stakeholders count on you to monitor this budget proactively throughout the year. They, seeing that you have a financial report on every single board meeting or on your quarterly board meeting, where you're going over your profits and loss and reviewing it, formally, is a really great way to show them, we are on it, we are watching things, and we are monitoring things. This is another really important one, again, to remember as a board member, to not get swept up in a couple of board members that really know. And hopefully I can give you a little bit of education today for those who aren't the greatest with finances, of things to look for in a budget, and ask a question, to not get swept up and be a non-management type person. So for setting and approving the budget for nonprofits with employees, the budget is usually involves the staff and its creation. They're the ones that do the business day to day. Therefore, they can feed in. It takes us this much money, to go buy X, Y, and Z to deliver this program. So usually staff is involved if there is staff for the nonprofit. If there is not staff and it's volunteers or it's just the board, then the board may do it. Usually a budget, as far as setting it, is you kind of want to budget conservatively and stuff, as we have found in this last year. Center your budget discussions around a worst case scenario, so that way you're constantly prepared to deal with a crisis. And almost all of us have had to deal with that crisis this last couple of years. So if you have a conservative budget to start with and you wind up with an upside, fabulous, that is great. But as a nonprofit who is operating prudently on behalf of the public, it is wise to budget conservatively. Make sure that you consider what's considered committed revenues versus uncommitted revenues. So you may have a donor that gives to you every single year and stuff, and something may happen financially for them one year and they cannot give. So whenever you're looking at your revenues, you always want to have have that open discussion as far as, this is, we've always gotten this from so-and-so, but we probably, maybe we should take it down a little bit. The economy, it may be a tough year on people. I know whenever I was redoing budgets for a lot of the nonprofits that I worked with during COVID, just our annual giving campaign, we slashed it huge because we just knew that it would be difficult for people. You also, whenever you're setting a budget, you want to take into account any restraints or limitations that a gift may have on it. A big one for us in nonprofit space is grants. Is that grant restricted to only be used for certain things? Or is it an unrestricted grant or an unrestricted gift? And therefore, you can use it for anything that you want. Overhead, yay! And a good example for us during Caldor is we really, asked people to make these gifts unrestricted. We did have a check come in one day that had in the memo for assistance of, animals in Caldor. That restriction had been made, and therefore we had to make sure that those funds and that limitation was met for that donor. It's super, super important. So make sure that you're aware if you have limitations, either from a donor as far as a specific amount or that it is a grant for a specific amount. Another good example of this one is the gifts that had come in for a local school did a Move the Bus campaign. It was fabulous because anybody who works with the school kids around here, buses are very, very expensive. It was so fabulous. They got so much money. They didn't need to use it all. That money is now restricted from here going forward and can only be used for buses. It's great. They've got a great pot of money now for buses, but it's going to take them now a few years to get through it. And they have other needs that need to be supported. Make sure you use your history, and you'll see whenever I open example at this point, you kind of know, when are your fundraising events? What is your cycle of money? How do things flow in and out? And it's super important to be aware of that you're going to run tight up until your big fundraising event in X month and stuff, kind of like a business. I know, having worked here in the wine industry for a little bit in between jobs, that, the winter months, people aren't out, they aren't going wine tasting as much. So hence they build in things like their wine club distributions and those payments during those months that it's slower. So evaluate your history, evaluate your large donations. A lot of people have those donations come flying in at the end of the year for tax purposes. So being aware of that. The board approves the budget, usually at their annual meeting prior to the next fiscal year, whatever your fiscal year is. Managing the budget. You want to review them at least quarterly. You want to give them more than a cursory review. You want to take note of anything unordinary. Don't be afraid to ask questions. I know everyone is in this space, but usually I found with finance questions, you're not the only one in the room with the question. So usually whenever I stick up my hand and ask a question, somebody will immediately go, oh, I was wondering the same thing. Again, be transparent about your budget. Your donors and stakeholders really do value that. They trust you. Strive to equal or exceed your expenses. It's good practice to have a reasonable amount of money allocated for cash flow to avoid having a deficit. So you want to work on that reserve, but you also don't want to be sitting on too much of a reserve as well. So it's that nice balance. If you do run a deficit, you want to address it immediately. And I'll actually discuss this here in appointment to develop. If you run a deficit, something wound up costing a lot more than you expected, bring it up at the meeting, talk about how you're going to take care of it and deal with it. Budgets are not written in stone. The financial position can change anytime throughout the year. Again, a fundraiser, something came in more expensive. A fundraiser did not go as well as you thought. So you want to deal with that as that comes along. Balance budgets, and that's where we were discussing earlier. If you balance your budget, it creates a barrier for you building your reserve. So usually you want to hope that you actually have a little bit above, and I'll actually show you here in a second in a closer look where they've actually captured a reserve in their budget. Again, strategic deficits may be okay though. So if you're spending some money that it might take you a little bit to see the benefit out of, so you buy a new software package to help with donors, for example, that might be a strategic deficit that you agree that you're okay with. All right, now we're going to do a closer look. I did get permission from this organization to share this because it's a simple one. I know some of them can get very overwhelming. Melissa Neal, their executive director, and Krista Campbell said I could pull an old Excel budget to take a look at because I love how simplistic this one is. And then you can go look at your so this is a 2019 budget from Ag in the Classroom. And usually you start with your revenue at the top and then we'll go down to expenses, but you can see where they've actually called things out where they have unrestricted donations. They actually as well have in here an endowment that they have with the El Dorado Community Foundation. And then they go into their other sources of revenue. I'll scroll down slowly because I know this sometimes gives you guys major brain hurt online. You can also, for example, see in here where they've had some temporarily restricted funds, again, funds that were restricted for a certain purpose. So making these things known and out there and very visual in your budget is super important. That way you can ask questions about things. If I was looking at this budget right now and I had any questions, probably a good discussion point might be, so the approved budget for 2019 was for this add-on for some dues that comes from the El Dorado County Farm Bureau. We had budgeted to get $2,000 from these dues. At the end of the year, for the year, we actually only wound up, we had hoped it had gone up because here's our actual from 2018, we had gotten 1,500. We were hoping in 2019 we would get 2,000. In the end, we only got 1,195. So a good discussion point as a board was, what happened? Did the Farm Bureau members forget us? Maybe we should do a little bit of marketing. Maybe the Farm Bureau could plug a little something in their newsletter for us to remind them about this opportunity. So looking for those disconnects is a great way as a board member for you to engage. What happened here? Is there something that we could do to make it better? Looking at the revenue side of things, those are great talking points. Expense side of things, as a board member, usually you're going to have personnel in here. You can take a look at that as far as what's going on. You can see that Ag in the Classroom was running very nicely. I believe they did some hiring. Yes. So they, you can see some money missing in here. And I think there were some more hours involved, but their year end for 2018 was $36,000. They budgeted $48,000 in 2019, and they ran almost right up against budget on that. So that was budgeted pretty well. and stuff. So, you may not have questions in here. You may dig into the details and see some differences in here, but, looking at these bottom lines, what did you plan? What was your history? What did you plan on? Where are you coming in are good things to look at. Contracts as well. They obviously had put some forethought in 2018, they had about $9,000 in contracts. They knew that they weren't going to have as much, and again, budgeted appropriately. Then you get down into their project expenses are usually broken up as well in here. This is one that it's like, do we need to look at this? They actually planned for more. They came in low again, almost again with the same as last year. What happened? Did we get a deal on something? Why didn't we spend what we said we were going to spend? In a way, you might think that's a good thing, but it's like, is it? What changed? Ask those questions. And stuff. And then you get down into your operations overhead. So again, overheads down here as far as, what you hope to do, what wound up happening in your past history. But these are some ways. And here's where you can see they had loaded in a 5% reserve. They still did not get there at this point. For this year, they had hoped to set back $2,400. Usually they'll go up and they'll take care of everything else first. And then if you have anything left, then you load it in your reserve. They did not have anything left. So unfortunately, this is going to be a budget miss for the year for them. So having that discussion at the end of the year, yes, we do want to keep marching toward this. What can we do differently next year to make sure that we start filling that reserve bucket? So this is just a really simple for you as a board member to give you a couple of things to think about, to hopefully give you a little bit more comfort in looking at budgets and asking good questions whenever you're dealing with them. All right, I'm going to move through the next couple really quickly because yay, I made it through the meat of it. And I want to leave a few minutes for questions here at the end. So I'm going to move through these more softer things that I said if we get time to that we would get to. I see we are at 12:14 right now. So I'm going to give us about 5 more minutes on this stuff and then I'll break for questions. This is the thing that I said, it's slang now for I agree. And I love this quote from you never get a second chance to make a first impression. So the biggest thing as a board member is for you to have your elevator speech and for you, honestly, to be familiar with your website and what is out there and available for people. Elevator pitch, I don't think I'm going to have to get into this too far with you guys, but it is basically a quick, they say in an elevator ride, it is a quick way for you to share about your organization, who you are, what you do. And usually you want that hook, that memorable emotional components. I love doing this, especially at board retreats, possibly, is to work on your elevator pitch and practicing with each other of you just met someone and how would you pitch your organization? You're trying to get people to discuss it. And this may not don't always have money at the forefront. Really an elevator pitch is you're trying to get someone to become a supporter, whether they invest their time, their talent, and or their money. There are all sorts of ways that people can support your organization. They might not be the right person, but they might know somebody who would have an interest in your organization. So that's why elevator pitches are really, really important. The other one that's really important is your website. And as a board member, you being familiar with your website. Again, so many of us are working boards that do have a website. This is where a website is, where people make connections and you can even entice people to donate. I know everybody gets hung up. Well, should I be on Twitter? Should I be on Instagram? Should I be on this? Should I be on that? Websites, and Kathy, if I could see her right now, would be shaking her head yes. From baby boomers to Gen Z, and by the way, the next one's called Gen Alpha. The one thing that we all engage with, no matter what our demographic is the website. That's why it is so important to your nonprofit to make sure your website is dialed in. So whether your board is a working board or a governing board, You should be familiar with your website's content. Can they donate on your website? Can they not donate on your website? Are your programs out there to tell people, oh, go check out our website. You can see pictures from Farm Day or whatever. You want to be familiar as a board member to have that in your toolkit of what is in your website. I go into a lot of things on the next couple pages about what are good things. You know, as a board member, it's always really good for your website, whoever's developed your website, for you to get in there. You are a test person for the public as far as, is it accessible? Usually you need to be able to get around in less than 3 clicks. So if they cannot donate to you in less than 3 clicks, you got a problem. So go in, look around. Is it intuitive to you? Would it be intuitive to a donor or somebody you have just given your elevator pitch to? Again, making sure that it is easily able to navigate and get around. The other one that you need to be aware of is look at your website on a computer or a laptop, a desktop. Look at your website on a phone. I know Chris Ringnes will be yay Avis on this one. Phones wind up, unless you have a mobile design built into your website, you may look completely cattywampus from a phone, and you do not want that to be the impression that you give a donor who you maybe meet at an event and they're like, oh, wait, what's your website? And they pull it up and it's all askew. You want to make sure that you have a mobile friendly design. You want to make sure, if it is one of those gens that likes social media, that you have links to your social media on your website so they know. Again, giving. Make sure that if you have a donation platform, that it is tied to your website, and you as a board member know that they can donate online easily with a credit card, with Venmo. You want to know that. You do not want to leave them any reason or not having knowledge walking away from a conversation with you. Calls to action is another place. This is where it is so important for you to have good stories on your websites, compelling imagery, but have enough white space that it's not completely overwhelming. So as a board member, take time, again, look through it. And there's some other things on there, having an events calendar. So these are just some fun other things to think about when it comes to a website. And then I'm going to quickly hit goals. As a board member, you participating in setting goals for your organization is super, super important. And this is usually, I would like to say, goal setting is usually done with staff, senior volunteers, or a board of directors. Things that you can use when you develop your goals is if you have surveys or feedback from your organization. Usually you'll set goals for the next 12 months. I love to set goals at the same time as you're doing your budget, because if you set goals that cost money and they aren't in your budget, that's a problem. So you want to make sure that you are aware of what goals you're setting. I like to have, for small nonprofits, start out with just a couple. We want to increase our donations by 5% this year. And here's a few things we're going to do. We want to increase our Facebook. Don't go crazy at the beginning. Just go simple. I know if Bill's on here, I can't see everybody. One of his big mantras is, do something and do it really, really well, and then add on, and then add on. Don't try to take on too much. So pick 1 or 2 goals for the year that you want to do for an organization that you're going to track, and you're going to make sure that you have some concrete things other than just delivering your program as well. Goals should be smart. They should be specific as far as, again, who, what, when, and where. So again, I would like to grow my donor base by 5% by the end of 2023. Can I track that? Yes, I can, by the names of my donors and the amount of donations. And is this achievable? Do I have the skill sets to do this and I'm just not applying them? So you want to make sure it's achievable. Is it relevant? And is it timely? And I won't hit the link right now because I do want to give us time for questions, or if there's any I haven't hit, but there is a link on here for you to go look at some great examples of SMART goals for nonprofits that are very applicable. There's everything from donors to website engagement and stuff on here. So there we go. Chris, Kathy, anything I didn't answer?
Nope. I think you still have a slide for me, right?
I do.
Okay.
So we actually do have one question that came in via direct message to me. I think they probably meant to send it to the chat, but didn't. And that question is, what is, from way back at the beginning, what is the best way to present potential new board members to the board before the vote?
I love, so there's a couple of ways you could do it. Especially if this is someone that you're bringing in that the rest of the board doesn't know. You could go as formal as having an application. So that way they almost are completing a little resume. And I know there's a couple of entities on here that I've done Google Forms for that, name, address, what's your experience as a board member? Why are you interested in this? That way it almost kind of creates a little resume that you can then print out and share with your board members. Hey, I'd like to bring so-and-so on. I know you all aren't familiar with them, but here's, who they are and here's what they're bringing to the table. Another way is even simpler, which we do with the Ponderosa High School Foundation, is we have people send us, more than often I say, a letter of intent or an email of intent. But again, it's an email of intent where they just email me, I'd really like to be on your board. Here's my connection to the school. Here's some things that I've done, super simple and, in the past that would lend itself to me being an asset. So some super, super simple ways to bring that person forth to the board, especially if they don't know them and stuff, and for you to familiarize them, for people to make an educated response. And I'd be happy to share those Google Forms as well if anybody would like them, as far as what we've done for applications. It's information you're going to need after a while anyhow, like their address and stuff if they wind up getting on the board. So it's nice to have that complete. Anything else? Awesome.